Owen Everett Holmes noticed the discrepancies on a Tuesday night. 3 times in 21 days, items vanished from his estate's inventory system. Canned goods, medical supplies, protein bars, all flagged by the automated tracking software he'd installed to manage his 30-room mansion with surgical precision. He stared at the access logs on his monitor, the blue light washing over his face in the dark study. Only one name appeared on all 3 dates: Leela James, his housekeeper. The woman who'd worked for his family since he was 5 years old. Owen wasn't a man who tolerated mysteries. At 32, he ran a multinational development firm worth $800 million. He'd built his empire on data, efficiency, and control. Every variable accounted for. Every risk calculated. Every person in their proper place. But this felt different. Not like theft, exactly. More like betrayal. A quiet kind that lived in the shadows of trust. He didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, he made a decision that would crack open everything he thought he understood about the world he'd built around himself. The next evening, Owen left his office early. He told his assistant to cancel dinner with the Singapore investors. He drove himself home in the black sedan with tinted windows, parked down the street from his own estate, and waited. At exactly 10:15, Leela emerged from the side gate. She wore a gray coat that had seen too many winters and carried a worn canvas bag over her shoulder. She walked with the same steady, unhurried pace she'd used for decades. No furtiveness, no guilt, just purpose. Owen followed her on foot to the bus stop 3 blocks away. She boarded the eastbound line without looking back. He got on 2 doors behind her, pulling his collar up and keeping his face turned toward the window. The bus rattled through neighborhoods that grew progressively darker, rougher, more forgotten. Manicured lawns gave way to chain-link fences. Boutique coffee shops became boarded storefronts. The people on the bus changed too. Tired faces, work uniforms. The weight of survival etched into every line and shadow. Leela got off at Martin Luther King Boulevard. Owen stayed a block behind as she turned down a narrow street lined with buildings that looked like they'd been beautiful once, maybe 50 years ago. She stopped at a low brick structure with peeling paint and barred windows. The faded sign above the door read Community Youth Resource Center. Owen moved closer, positioning himself near a darkened window. Through the glass, he could see Leela unpacking her bag onto a folding table. Plastic containers. Carefully portioned meals. She worked quickly, efficiently, laying out rice, beans, vegetables, and bread. Then the children appeared, maybe 10 of them, ranging from 5 to 12. They formed a quiet line, patient and respectful. One little girl, no more than 7, stepped forward first. Leela handed her a plate with a smile that Owen had never seen before. Warm, open, unguarded. The smile of a woman who wasn't serving out of obligation, but out of love. The girl looked up at her with wide eyes. "Is this from the fancy house you work at, Miss Leela?" Leela's voice was soft but clear. "It's from people who had more than they needed. Now it's exactly where it belongs." Owen felt something crack inside his chest. Not anger. Not even disappointment. Something worse. Shame. Because she'd been right not to tell him. She'd known exactly what he was. A man who counted every dollar, every resource, every transaction. A man who'd never once asked what she did when she left his perfectly controlled world. He watched her serve every child with the same gentle attention. She knew their names. She asked about homework. She wiped one boy's face with a napkin and adjusted another girl's ponytail. These weren't random kids. They were her kids. The ones nobody else saw. The ones the city forgot. And Leela, who earned $42,000 a year cleaning his toilets and ironing his shirts, was feeding them with food she'd salvaged from his excess. Owen turned away from the window. His hands were shaking, not from cold. From the sudden, crushing realization that he'd been living his entire life in a house of mirrors. Seeing only himself, his success, his empire. never the people who held it all together in silence. He walked back to his car slowly, his breath forming clouds in the December air. By the time he reached the driver's seat, his vision had blurred. He sat there for 20 minutes, gripping the steering wheel, staring at nothing. The next morning, Owen did something he hadn't done in 15 years. He went to the kitchen while Leela was working. She looked up from the counter where she was chopping vegetables for his lunch, surprise flickering across her face before her professional mask slid back into place. "Mr. Holmes, is something wrong with breakfast?" He shook his head. His throat felt tight. "No, I need to talk to you." She set down the knife, her dark hands still against the white cutting board, waiting, always waiting for the accusation she knew would come eventually, because it always did, didn't it? For people like her. But Owen didn't accuse. Instead, he said the words that had kept him awake all night. "I followed you last night." To the community center. Her entire body went still. Not defensive, just tired. Like she'd been carrying a secret too heavy for too long, and now it had finally fallen. "I can explain," she said quietly. "You don't have to. The food was expired or marked for disposal. I checked every label. I would never, Leela." His voice cracked. "You don't have to explain. I'm the one who needs to explain." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw something in her eyes he'd never noticed before. Not fear, not resentment, just a deep, bone-weary resignation. The look of a woman who'd spent 63 years being invisible. Owen pulled out a chair at the kitchen table. "Will you sit with me, please?" She hesitated, then lowered herself into the chair across from him, her hands folded in her lap. It's professional even now. "How long have you been running that program?" he asked. 3 years? Since the city cut funding for after-school meals? And you've been using food from my house? Only what was going to waste. Only what the system flagged for disposal. I never took anything that Leela." He reached across the table, stopping just short of touching her hands. "I'm not angry. I'm ashamed." Her eyes widened slightly, "Sir. You've worked for my family for 28 years. You practically raised me after my parents died, and I never once asked where you lived. If you had family, if you needed anything, I treated you like part of the furniture. That was your right, Mr. Holmes. I worked for you." No. The word came out harder than he intended. "No, that's the problem. I built my entire company on the idea of recognizing untapped potential, of seeing what others miss, but I missed you. The most brilliant, compassionate person in my life, and I looked right through you for 3 decades." Lila's lips pressed together. Her eyes glistened, but no tears fell. She'd learned long ago not to cry in front of white men. It never helped. Owen stood abruptly, pulling out his phone. "I want to see where you live. I want to meet the kids. I want to understand what I've been too blind to see. Mr. Holmes, you don't have to. I know I don't have to. But I'm asking. Please, let me see your world." She studied his face for a long moment, searching for the trap, the angle, the white savior performance that would end as soon as the cameras stopped rolling. But all she saw was a man who looked genuinely broken. Finally, she nodded. "All right, Saturday, 2 o'clock. I'll give you the address." That Saturday, Owen stood outside a 3-story walk-up in a neighborhood his GPS had marked as high crime. The building's brick facade was crumbling. Half the windows were covered with plastic sheeting. A group of teenagers on the corner watched him with the calculated wariness of young people who'd learned not to trust clean shoes and expensive watches. Leela met him at the door. She led him up a narrow stairwell that smelled of industrial cleaner and fried food. At the 3rd floor, she unlocked a door marked 3C. The apartment was small, maybe 600 square feet, but it was immaculate. Every surface clean. Every item in its place. Photos covered the walls. Some were old, sepia-toned images of people in their Sunday best. Others were recent. School pictures, a young man in military uniform, a woman who looked like Leela, but younger. "That's my daughter, Anita," Leela said softly, following his gaze. "She passed 4 years ago. Lupus. She was 31. Owen's chest tightened. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "I didn't tell you. It happened during your acquisition of the Portland properties. You were traveling. I took 3 days off and came back. You sent flowers to the office. Your assistant signed the card." He closed his eyes. "Leila, it's all right, Mr. Holmes. You had important work. Stop calling me that." His voice was raw. "Please. My name is Owen." She looked at him with something like pity. Old habits. A door opened behind them. A boy emerged, maybe 9 or 10, thin and dark-skinned, with careful eyes. He wore a faded X-Men t-shirt and carried a book under his arm. "Grandma, is this him?" Leela's entire demeanor softened. "Louis, this is Mr. Holmes." "Owen, this is my grandson, Louis." Owen extended his hand. Louis shook it with surprising firmness, his eyes never leaving Owen's face. Assessing, judging. "You're the one she works for," Louis said. "Not a question. I am. The one with the big house and the cars." "Yes." "And you followed her here because you thought she was stealing." Owen felt his face flush. Yes, I was wrong." Louis nodded slowly. "She said you were smart, but not wise." "I think I understand now." Leila touched her grandson's shoulder gently. "Louis, it's true, Grandma. You always say there's a difference." Owen crouched down to Louis's eye level. "Your grandmother is right. I've been smart about a lot of things, but I've been an idiot about people, especially the people who matter most." Louis studied him for another moment, then shrugged. "You want some water?" "It's warm. Our fridge is broken." The casual revelation hit Owen like a punch. "How long has it been broken?" 2 months, Leela said quietly. "The landlord says he'll fix it when he has time." Owen stood, pulling out his phone. "What's the landlord's number?" "Mr. Holmes, really? It's Owen. And give me the number." "She did," he called. The conversation lasted 90 seconds and consisted mostly of Owen explaining in precise legal terms exactly how many housing code violations the building was currently in and how quickly he could have inspectors crawling over every inch of the property if a working refrigerator wasn't installed by Monday morning. He hung up and turned to find both Leela and Louis staring at him. "That was cool," Louis said. Owen felt something warm spread through his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose, real purpose, not the boardroom kind. The human kind. "Can I see the community center?" he asked. Leila nodded. "Let me get my coat." The walk to the center took 15 minutes. Louis walked between them, chattering about school and books and a science project about black holes. Owen listened, really listened, and realized he'd forgotten what it felt like to hear a child's voice full of wonder instead of demand. The center was even smaller than it had looked through the window. One main room with folding tables and mismatched chairs. A corner with a stack of donated books. A tiny kitchen with a 2-burner hot plate. The room was full 20 kids from toddlers to teens, reading, drawing, helping with homework. A few watched Owen enter with the cautious eyes of children who knew strangers could hurt. "Everyone, this is Mr. Owen," Leila said. "He's a friend. Not employer, not benefactor." A little girl hugged Leela's waist. "Did you bring mac and cheese?" "Tomorrow," Leela promised. Owen swallowed. This human closeness without contracts or profit was what he'd missed. An older woman approached, silver-haired, sharp-eyed. "So you're Mr. Holmes?" "Just Owen." "Dorothy Washington? I run this place. Leila says you're a good man who forgot how to see past his walls." "She's right." "So why are you here?" "Guilt, curiosity. All of it," Owen said. I just want to help. Dorothy gestured around. Leaking roof, broken heat. Open 3 days a week. We turn away more kids than we serve. Owen opened his phone, took notes, asked questions. Finally, he looked up. I want to fund a full renovation and an endowment. 7 days a week. Paid staff. Why? Because Leela shouldn't choose between feeding kids and surviving. Because I've spent 32 years building wealth, not worth. Words are cheap. Then judge my actions. He turned to Leela. Run this place. Full time. Triple your salary. Tears fell not from relief, but from being seen. When you walk away? Dorothy asked. Owen knelt. Put the money in a trust. Fire me if I fail. Let me earn your trust. Leela nodded. No press. You show up every week. I will. If you break your word, she said, I won't forgive you. I understand. She offered her hand, not as an employee, but an equal. They shook, and something in Owen broke open. For 6 months, he came every Saturday. He read about space and dinosaurs, helped with math, learned that Marcus wanted to be a vet. That Shanice wrote poetry, that destiny feared storms. He renovated the center roof floors, kitchen, library, and filled it with books. At meetings, he sat in the back, listening to parents talk about hunger, violence, and schools that gave up too early. He didn't speak. He learned. One evening, Owen sat on the steps with Louis. Why did you follow my grandma? The boy asked. Because I thought she was stealing, Owen said, and I was wrong. Louis nodded. My mom said suspicion comes first. That's why she never got promoted. It doesn't have to be that way, Owen said. It'll take more than Saturdays. Maybe, Owen said. Louis looked at him. Believing us the first time would help. Owen swallowed. I'm sorry. Sorry is just the beginning, Louis said. What matters is what you do next. 8 months later, Owen stood in the back of an auditorium as Leela addressed the crowd. For most of my life, she said, I was invisible not because people were cruel, but because the system taught them I was furniture. Owen watched her command that room with the same quiet authority she'd used for decades. But now people were finally listening. But invisibility isn't the same as absence, Leela continued. We've always been here. Black women holding up the world while the world pretended not to notice. And we're tired. Tired of being strong. Tired of being silent. Tired of waiting for permission to be seen. The applause started slowly, then built like thunder. After the speech, Owen met her in the hallway. She looked exhausted but radiant. You were incredible, he said. She smiled. I've been practicing that speech for 40 years. Just never had anyone willing to listen. I'm listening now. I know, baby. She touched his cheek gently. The gesture was motherly. Full of grace he didn't deserve. And I'm proud of the man you're becoming. His throat closed up. I'm sorry it took me so long. Some people never wake up at all. You woke up. That's what matters. Louis appeared from around the corner, carrying Leela's coat. He'd grown 3 inches in the past year, and his voice was starting to crack. Grandma, Mrs. Washington wants to talk to you about the scholarship fund. Leela squeezed Owen's arm once, then followed her grandson down the hallway. Owen watched them leave, then opened his calendar. Every Saturday for the next year was blocked off not for golf or meetings, but for the center, for the kids. For the world he'd ignored while counting money behind walls. His assistant questioned it. The board complained. Genevieve accused him of a midlife crisis. Owen didn't waver. Louis had been right. Sorry was only the beginning. What mattered was what came next. For the first time in 32 years, Owen knew what he was building toward. Not wealth or power or legacy, but human worth. The kind found in a child who finally had enough to eat, in a grandmother spared the choice between rent and medicine, in the quiet power of being seen. That night, his mansion felt obscene. He searched real estate listings not for investments, but affordable homes in Leela's neighborhood. He transferred funds, created a housing trust, kept rents controlled for people. When the board threatened him, he said, "Let them vote." When Genevieve asked what happened, he answered, "I woke up." 2 years later, the center had transformed, feeding hundreds, teaching thousands. But the real change was invisible. The kids looked up now. They believed they belonged. When Owen was pulled to the microphone, he said the only words that mattered. "Thank you for letting me be worthy of you." He hadn't saved anyone. He'd learned something harder, that every human being deserves to be seen. And it changed his life forever.